live. I'll give it a few minutes for folks to join us and get situated. Also, pull this up. All right. Give us just a few more minutes to have folks join us for today's town hall conversation. Let's see. All right, we're gonna give it one more minute, then get right into today's topic and special guest keynote speaker. All right. All right, perfect. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for coming and logging in with us to check out today's topic. This is one of 3 town halls that we're hosting around movement building and reproductive justice. And so if you've been busy these past couple of years and navigating the pandemic and life and haven't had a chance to get plugged in and know more about what Ivy Black Girl is doing or who we are a collective that creates space for Black women, femmes, and girls for being able to access full potential to authentically be. And so check out our website, which will be in the chat in just a second, for more information and ways to engage. And so today we've got a special treat. We've got a keynote speaker and our own Ivy Black Girl reproductive justice organizer, Michaela Atkins, who will be introducing and facilitating the conversation. So without delaying any further, I'll pass it to Michaela and we can go ahead and jump right into it. Michaela, welcome to the town hall.
Hi, thank you, Melinda. Hi, I'm so glad to be here. And I'm going to be introducing a super, super dope individual. So today with us, we have Zayana Bryant. Zayana is an Echo Scholar at the University of Virginia studying political and social thought. She's a young change maker and an award-winning activist, organizer, content creator, and social impact strategist. She's also the architect of Black Women Built This, which is a strategy and storytelling brand. In the spring of 2016, Zayana wrote a petition calling for the removal of Confederate statues from Charlottesville's parks, and they were removed in July of 2021. Zayana has also been featured in the New York Times, National Geographic, the New Yorker magazine, Forbes, and featured on Vice News, PBS, CNN, and BET. In 2018, she was awarded the Princeton Prize in Race Relations and the Bassett Award for Community Engagement from Yale University. Zayana has served as a student scholar board representative for the Charlottesville City Schools Division and is a passionate advocate for educational equity. So, without further ado, I want to welcome our keynote speaker, Zayana Bryant.
Hi, Michaela. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm so excited to join y'all today. Um, I'm not gonna take too long, but there are a couple things that I do want to cover. So as you already said, Michaela, I wrote the petition to take down the statues in Charlottesville, and wrote that petition in the spring of 2016. And so today I kind of just want to share a little bit about my story as a Black girl and what advocacy means to me and why it is that I do the work that I do, but also what it means more broadly to be a Black woman doing the work in a time like now. And so I feel like a quote that has really gotten me through so much of this pandemic and the summer of 2020, when all of us were taken to the streets, it felt like every single day, in the wake of the deaths of Ahmaud Arbery and also George Floyd, and Breonna Taylor. And it felt like, because we were already shut down, so many of us were taking so much time to really sit in what the current state of America is for Black people, and especially Black women as well. A quote that has been getting me through is Alice Walker. Alice Walker once said, "The most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any." And so as we look at the ways that social media is shifting and popular culture is shifting to discuss the ways that Black women are often undervalued, not paid their rate, not paid at all for the labor that they do, and just how we forget to give Black women their flowers when they definitely deserve them. That quote felt so timely and so appropriate. So I wanted to share that. Some of the things and some of the concepts that I want to cover today are kind of the tenets that I use when it comes to organizing. These are my personal principles or beliefs. One being that we have abundance. There's abundance all around us, and I believe that everything that we need to save our communities exists, whether it's, capital, whether it is places for people to live, whether it is food, all of these things that we need in order to solve the problems in our community. I believe that they exist around us. And it simply will take, changing the conversations around charity versus mutual aid, or how people interact with each other, how freely they give to each other, how abundantly they give to each other, and how people decide to kind of relinquish some of their privilege, some of their capital, in order to meet the energy of what they say their politic is. In addition to abundance, there's this idea of grace. As Black girls and young Black women, it is important to remember that extending grace to both ourselves and others is essential. That is something that I had to learn as I was in kind of the forefront of this movement in Charlottesville, as white supremacists, Nazis, and racists more broadly were kind of just coming into our town from out of town. And also, some of the locals were feeling more emboldened by the 2017 era, when statues were being taken down all across the South and being questioned or discussed again in cities like Memphis, New Orleans, and even at North Carolina Chapel Hill. There was this group of people who felt more comfortable with being overt racist in public, whereas a lot of people had said, "Oh, they're in their basements on computers behind screens." But we started to see them come out into the streets with bearing tiki torches, bearing flag poles, and brutalizing Black bodies, and Black people, specifically in Charlottesville, in places like Kenosha and Portland. And so I felt like it was so important for me to remember that in those moments, it was the grace of community and collective care that was getting me through, but also the grace that I was allowing myself to give to me in order to fill back up my cup when I needed self care. Because being in those situations, in those very racially traumatic situations like the 2017 rally in Charlottesville, is something that will change your life forever. So grace was something that I had to offer myself. And even still now, as I'm continuing to organize around educational equity, organize around what does it mean to fund resources to Black girls, extending grace to myself and to other Black women around me, is something that I feel like has to be a foundational practice in order to build movements that last. And then lastly, the ability to discern when it is time for rest. I feel like that goes very nicely with this idea of grace. But I think Black women, because we know that we are the superheroes, we know that we often do save the day, we're tasked with so much. And I think we start to make ourselves feel guilty when we need to take a step back. And so, in addition to being able to extend grace to yourself and others in order to build sustainable movements, there has to be the training up of the next people, the next leaders, and also the leaders who are the now, in order for us to have that space to take rest. So we should be, horizontal leaders where we are leading in a horizontal line. I should be able to step up this moment and lead on this initiative, and then be able to step back and allow, my counterparts, my peers, my comrades to lead on other initiatives. And I feel like good leaders are able to know when it's time to step up and step back. So that discernment there, I feel like, is such an important part of movement work, especially for young Black women and Black girls. So who am I? In addition to the bio that was read, I am a Black girl who was raised by a single Black mom. I am a Black girl who was also raised by a Black grandmother, and I live in the South. I live in Charlottesville, Virginia. Grew up kind of in church. So that background of just having Black women as leaders, but also understanding the kind of dynamics of politics and how oftentimes there are boundaries forced onto Black women is something that I grew up noticing. In addition to growing up in the South more broadly, I grew up in Charlottesville, a very kind of segregated town, but one that is also self-proclaimed liberal, progressive, if you will. So for that reason, it makes it much more complicated. The racism it doesn't always look like it did in 2017. It also looks like the train tracks separating opportunities in a town. It also looks like Black students being pushed out of honors and AP courses or not even knowing that the options exist. It looks like this very strategic and systematic way of excluding some and including others, and making sure that the ones that are excluded never have the opportunity to question their positioning. So growing up in that has been interesting, but it has also informed my work. I also come from a family that has been civically engaged for generations. Two of my great uncles were two of the first 12 students to integrate schools in Charlottesville. And so when I think about what does educational equity look like for me and why does it matter, it's very much so linked to my survival. I started to decided that my advocacy was important when I recognized my own family's history, when I recognized the fact that there were Black peers who were in classes with me back in elementary school that I had never seen again when we got to high school, when I understood that there were peers of mine who were Black who had never been beyond 50 miles of their home. And so understanding that, yes, these opportunities like travel, like exposure to higher education is really kind of predestined based on these systems that govern us and govern our experiences in the ways that we interact with other people. So with all of that in mind, I started to lean on this idea of activism and organizing at a young age. I organized my first protest, which was a rally for justice for Trayvon Martin in 2013. So being a 12-year-old, it was, amazing to me that people were able to gather into space and that I had a megaphone and people were listening. But my biggest takeaway from that situation or from that time when everyone was talking about police brutality in 2013 was that young people have not only the power to lead the future, but the power to lead the now. And also, it helped me to ground my work in this idea that young people are one of the most crucial parts of the movement. And for every progressive movement that we can point back to, young people have been at the forefront. So that carried me through high school, where I established a Black Student Union at my high school. And that was in the fall. And then later that spring is when I wrote the petition to City Council calling for the removal of the Robert E. Lee statue. And I often tell myself I don't want the statues to define my work. However, it is such a defining moment for me, especially in my adolescent years, because I felt like I had to grow up so fast. And so now, as I look back as a person who is doing work beyond just statues, to really start to uplift, say the names of, and resource Black women who are doing the work, I had to really reflect on what is the adultification of Black girls and how does that play a role into the way that we approach the work. So I think I feel like that's heavy, but my main takeaway has been that Black girls deserve a childhood. And so with the work that I do now, whether it's being the program lead for Black Girls in Power over at the Youth Mentoring Action Network, or whether it is the mentorship opportunities that I have in Charlottesville here on the ground, it's remembering that we as Black women always lift as we climb. And so being able to make sure that we are investing in those infrastructures to pour into the Black women who will be the leaders of now and tomorrow, to pour into the Black women who will be making future policy decisions, but also to pour into ourselves and to those around us who share identities, because we do have the power to change our communities for the better. And it takes discipline, it takes collective action, but it also takes coming together, putting our brains together for a collective agenda. And so some takeaways that I want you to take away on those 3 points that I mentioned before is that the definition of abundance is a very large quantity of something. It's excess. And so the way that we can tap into this abundance to use it for the good of our communities or use it for the good of the issues that we are trying to shift and change is giving generously without expecting a return. And in doing so, we manifest the best, right? We start to pour seeds or plant seeds in the places where they need to be planted. When Black girls are doing well, when Black women are doing well, the entire community does well. And so this investment into Black girls, investing into programming led by Black girls and Black women is truly an investment into the entire community. Not competing because there is enough for all of us to thrive and live in luxury that we deserve. As you know, there's this whole trend on TikTok and all across social media about becoming that girl or Black women in luxury. I have to remember that being able to rest oftentimes is viewed as a luxury for Black women. And so understanding what does that mean? That means that Black women are laboring and and oftentimes not having the space to pour back into themselves. But also it means that we have to commit to deciding that we have to have boundaries and that we don't always have to overextend ourselves in order to make sure that everyone else is doing well while we're not. So it's kind of that self-preservation message there as well. On the topic of grace, grace is not just for others, it is also for ourselves. We have to remember to extend the same grace to ourselves that we extend to others. And sometimes that looks like being set in the boundaries we've set. It can also look like not allowing the negative self-talk of others to permeate our own sense of self. Listen, I lean on Black radical tradition all the time, but I specifically lean on the work of Black feminists and Black feminist theory. And Black feminists tell us that self-preservation is one of the most important parts of movement work. And so as we set those boundaries, as we do this work, preserving ourselves and understanding who we are, first of all, knowing who we are, understanding the women who have come before us, the Black trans women who have come before us, the Black queer women who have come before us, the Black non-binary people who have set and laid the foundation, who have come before us, is so important. And understanding that sense of them and thus ourselves it makes it easier for us to want to preserve ourselves because we understand from where we came. And lastly, again, the ability to discern when it is time to rest. Rest is powerful. It does reflect strength, and it is in our power to decide when we want to take a step back. Taking breaks is okay and well deserved, period. And on that note, I'm looking forward to the question and answer. Thank you so much for having me today. And Michaela, hi.
Hi, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's so funny that you mentioned the quote about Alice Walker because I actually used that in one of my speeches one time. It just means so right, right. We know what that quote means. We know what that quote stands for and what it does and the weight that it holds. So we're going to go ahead and jump into our Q&A session. And so the first question is, you kind of touched on this a little bit when you talked about grace and knowing when to rest. And, as an advocate, I know that you know that this work, as much as it can be rewarding, it can be tough and it could sometimes leave you feeling defeated or discouraged. And so I just wanted to know, like, what is it that keeps you going and keeps that fire under you and keeps you motivated? And how do you prioritize your self-care and your well-being?
I think being able to have personal space is one thing. Like being able to have a home base that is really peaceful is something that's important. And I feel like being able to prioritize that since I've moved into my third year of college and just understanding like investing in your bedroom is a thing, like getting a diffuser is a thing. But without tying it to like, I guess, capitalism, another thing that I feel like has been so helpful for me is just being able to take time for reading and reflection. Journaling is so powerful. Therapy is also powerful and something that I highly recommend. But I also am aware of the fact that therapy can be highly inaccessible, especially for low income Black women. So, with that in mind, like thinking about the ways that we can kind of cultivate our own practices. And I think journaling and reflection is a great one. Reading, and most importantly, like recently, TikTok has kind of been a little self-care for me. Like I find myself scrolling all the time. So I feel like TikTok is cool. I don't know, just seeing other Black women is, I know we say like representation is important, but it really is, especially when you're like a 20-year-old, 21-year-old, and you're in college, and it's like you go to a PWI, so you're not seeing a lot of people who look like you in the space.
Mhm.
So I feel like being able to see other people across social media has been helpful, seeing what they do for self care, listening to music, podcasts. I love the read. I also love Hey Girl by Alex L. So I love listening to those podcasts and then just seeing what the recent music is that comes out. Like I feel like that just sitting down, doing a listening session, listening to a playlist, making a playlist, like that's some self care.
I love it. I have not jumped on TikTok yet, but I keep hearing good. I know, and I think I'm just gonna have to buckle down and do it. I'm just gonna have to give
Mhm.
in. So as someone who is just starting out like their advocacy journey and is still really new to it, I always like to ask this question whenever I'm in a space with folks like you who have just done so much for the work. What is some advice that you wish someone told you before coming into this work?
Mhm. Well, I the first thing that I wish I knew, and the more I started to do it more, was I wish I knew how to charge for my skills and for my labor. I feel like Black women are definitely the blueprint, and we do a lot of work. And so I feel like whether it's like, oh, I need payment for school because I'm in college or I'm a first gen student, like being comfortable with valuing yourself enough to, even if it's not monetary pay, it could be resources, like an exchange of resources, like making sure that all of the work that we're doing is somehow not just benefiting everyone around us but also us. And so I feel like that's important, but also in those spaces where I have access, learning how to bring other people along with me, that's also the best
Mhm.
form of payment. Like whether it's, there are other Black girls who you grew up with, who are your peers, who you feel like who have um who have the experiences or the knowledge and who should be in the room. I feel like being able to bring those people in is so important. And so I feel like something I wish I had learned earlier was how to leverage my power once I get to the decision making tables. Because I know we're always like, we need a seat at the table or we're going to build our own. But it's like when we're in those rooms where the decisions are being made, how do we collectively bargain? How do we negotiate? How do we ask for the things that we want? And I feel like that's so important. So I wish I had learned that at an earlier age. I think also learning how to be authentically myself is something that I wish I had learned earlier. I think a lot of Black girls, especially when we start or we're deciding, it's time to get ready for college, it's time to get ready for the next step beyond high school, and trying to figure out what version of ourselves do we want to present to others so that the door is open for opportunities. And I think being able, once I stepped into my full authenticity and stepped into being comfortable with being my authentic self, I feel like the doors just flew open. So I was trying so hard to edit myself and to leave certain parts of myself outside of the room when really I should have been bringing all of those parts of me in. As I did that, I felt like I was able to, again, discern which opportunities were good for me and which weren't. So everyone talks about, like once you get to a certain level, you don't want to sell out, you don't want to kind of gain the world and lose yourself. And like, I feel like for me, it was once I realized like, oh, this person or these people accept the full version of me, that means I won't have to worry about later down the line trying to, sell out for a certain opportunity, for the next check, for the next scholarship, for the next opportunity. So I feel like those are some things I wish I had learned earlier. But then lastly, I would say the power in saying no, in that like, even though I am a young woman, no is still in my vocabulary and it's something that I have the right to use. And I think as young people, when we get into spaces, we can kind of be used up so quickly. It's like, oh, we're on the tech team, we're on this team, we're on that team, this committee, that committee. And people say, you're younger, you have more energy, but also Gen Z has a lot of responsibilities. And so I think being able to fully communicate, like, I'm not at the capacity to do this right now, but I'm committed to the work and I'm committed to doing as much as I can in my capacity, but this is my boundary. So the power of being able to say no is something that I learned better once I got into undergrad. But now I feel like it is absolutely like a wild card, a superpower to just be able to like say no and mean it.
Right. And no is a full sentence. Okay. I had to learn that. Kind of a follow-up question after that is you talked about being able to be your authentic self. When do you feel like you reached that, and how do you think that changed your advocacy work and your organizing work?
Mm-hmm. I feel like when I am in the company of my sisters with other Black women, I feel like I'm able to be so well supported. I've been a part of retreats. I've been a part of just different sister circle types of spaces. And I feel like we go into it without the expectation that we'll have to give a full history lesson and a lesson on microaggressions, right? And that's not to say that Black women are monolithic, but it is to say that there's some sort of basic knowledge or basic experience that most of us, I would say almost all of us, come into the room with. And so we can kind of just get straight to the work. We can get straight to, whatever the agenda is for the day. And I feel like when I'm in those spaces, I'm poured back into, because it's always a Black woman who, again, wants to mentor someone. So that's why I'm like, we as Black women, we naturally lift as we climb. And there are so many informal like mentors I've had, or informal big sisters I've had, who have really changed the trajectory of my life, because even if it wasn't my mom or my nana who was giving me this lesson, it was a Black woman who was like literally giving me some type of insight into the future. And so I feel like for that reason, Black women, just being in spaces with Black women can be so fulfilling. And I don't walk out of those spaces feeling depleted. Like, even if we did a lot of work, even if we did a lot of thinking for the day, like I can walk away and still be like, okay, I still have pieces of myself. I didn't have to, shout across the room, or I didn't have to kind of get out of character and be disappointed with myself for that, because I was in the company of a safe of my sisters and in a safe place. So I feel like, yeah, that's that.
Absolutely. I feel like a common theme with that is just feeling safe, being able to feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
So you had an extremely heavy hand in getting the Confederate statues taken down. Can you talk a little bit just about like that process and how it felt when it finally happened and like feeling that success?
Mhm. It took mm, it took 5 years for it to come down. It just came down this past summer, July 2021. So that was I remember, like, literally, I had written the petition on a Saturday. I think the next Monday, we had a press conference in the
Mhm.
park because just between that Saturday afternoon and that Sunday, it had been spread all over. News people were contacting me. And so I remember it was that Monday morning, going back to school. I had a softball game that evening. So I'm going downtown with all my softball equipment in the car and giving like this is my first time speaking like off the cuff in the
Mhm.
like in the community like this, and especially in front of so many journalists. So I had done a lot of public speaking, but not like that, and not that high pressure. I remember looking out into the park, and there was on one side all of the Black and white community members who I had seen in different racial justice spaces, or just like people I knew, like former city councilors, the lady who had been doing my hair since I was like 10. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like just random, like just people. And
Mhm.
then on the other side of the park, it was people I had never seen before, but who were dressed in Confederate flag kind of gear from head to toe. Hats, had Confederate flag um, poles, who were just, some were dressed up in like Civil War, like costume attire. And it was very scary because like you could feel the tension. Like the park was literally split in half. And
Mhm.
the statue was behind me. And so I gave a short little spiel as to why I wrote the petition, and then I left. And I remember some community members had to walk me to my car because they were extremely concerned about my safety. And it was in that moment that I realized, oh, this is about to be real. I just didn't know how real it was about to be. And so from that point on, there were many instances where I was like, this is real. Like I was sitting in my dual enrollment criminal law class one day and my phone starts buzzing. I'm like, oh Lord, what is it now? I'm used to like local news, maybe state news saying a thing or two. Breitbart had written this headline and it said, Virginia's social justice warriors want to tear down statues or something like that. And I have it as my header on Twitter because it's just funny. But at the moment, it was terrifying
Mhm.
because I was being doxxed by like grown men in their 50s or in their like 60s who were basically being just like the ringleaders for these white supremacists. And I started getting hate mail around that time for the first time to my house, packages, postcards. My school like administration was like, okay, what can we do for your security, for your safety? The next year around Black History Month, some kids in my school started to harass me. I mean, it was just like after that point, high school didn't feel normal again until maybe like second semester senior year, and I was about to leave and graduate, and I was just like, hey, I'm just doing what I want. But yeah, it really changed my life forever. I had to start being so much more vigilant of what I was doing, who I was around, but also just understanding the real threat that comes to Black leaders when they start to talk on certain topics. And that's why everyone, advises young Black girls to, oh, just talk about I don't know, just do voter registration, right? Do something that's not polarizing. But even now, as we think about it, like with voter suppression all across the South, like even even voter registration is polarizing. Um,
Right.
it is racially charged. So it's like it feels like the political climate has kind of intensified even since then. And then during the process of the Blue Ribbon Commission, which the city council appointed to decide on the fate of the statues, it was like the night before election night when they had one of their meetings, and everyone was like, wow, what's about to happen? How did Donald Trump make it this far? And then he is elected to be president, and everyone's just like in a state of shock, but also realizing that we still have a commitment to our communities to do the work that we have been doing. But so many changes in between that time. And I remember around 2019, after I graduated high school, I was like, okay, I want to shake up University of Virginia's campus. Let's get to that. Like, whatever they're going to do with the statues, they're going to do. There was ongoing like litigation. The state general assembly actually had to change a law in order for Charlottesville to like be able to remove the statues. So that was a long process, many lawsuits at the Virginia Supreme Court. And then finally, it was ruled that state localities should have the opportunity to decide the fate of their monuments. And once that decision was made, a public process had to go through like bidding, like who would get the statues, what would happen. And then finally they came down in July. And when someone first told me, they were like, the statues are probably going to come down in 60 days. I was like, okay, y'all, well, call me when it happens. I'll come downtown. Like, I mean, because we've been told so many times, like, it's going to go. There were trash bags put over it for like 9 months. So it was just like, you know, it was one of those things where it's like, we don't know what's going to happen. And the white supremacists were so committed to keeping them up that they would do whatever to keep them up. So finally seeing them come down was like a full circle moment. I was able to be alongside like my younger sisters who basically grew up watching me go through this process. They just turned 16. So, you know, they have seen like the good and the bad and all of those moments of what it looks like to be kind of like a figurehead for such a hot topic debate. My grandma, my mom, and just other community members who had like literally defended our community on August 12th, like on the ground. And so the fact that like a lot of them were, you know, beaten by white supremacists in the streets that are literally right in front of this statue, and then being there again in July to watch them come down was absolutely like a very powerful and moving moment. But I'm proud that they're down, but there's just so much work left to do. And I feel like over the past 5 years, I've learned that these statues are only the built environment's reflection of the deeper systemic issues that are beneath the surface that no one looks at. And so, and with understanding that, I've, you know, tapped into so many different facets of work. And so I really appreciate the reproductive justice conversation, because it is absolutely tied to those statues. Like when we think about like eugenics and we think about the biological racism and the practices even at the University of Virginia that were done on Black people, we can recognize the ways in which our built environment reflect those very dark and ugly historical eras.
I love it. I'm here for all of it. I'm here for all the full circle moments. Yes. I want to pause for a quick second and just see if we have any questions in the chat, and encourage our viewers to put some questions in the chat. I'm not seeing any so far. I do have one more question while we wait for those questions to get dropped in the chat. I want to know what, you know, because you said that is kind of just one of the first steps. What has your attention now? What are your next steps? What are you any projects you can let us in on that you're focusing on, or just what are your next moves? What you're looking at?
So right now I've been really shifting towards using my platform for mutual aid. So in the past 2 years, I think I've raised around like almost $60,000, maybe more, with mutual aid kind of like initiatives, just doing calls to action, putting requests on my platform for people to connect with the people who have the funds. I think when people with big platforms do that, we start to see a lot of resources shifting. And so I think that's a really great way to like just keep people engaged and to energize people online, especially those who have the resources and who are looking to do something. Open your purse is always a great answer. So I think mutual aid, without not just the digital side of it, but also like finding ways to give back to unhoused people in our community as the housing crisis like continues to worsen. So that is one thing. I am really starting to just try to get back into my scholarship bag, like trying to do more reading, do more writing, and kind of be in community with thinkers who are really trying to shift the way that we have conversations about Black girlhood. So really paying a lot of attention to and boosting and like taking in all of the content from groups like Justice for Black Girls, or people who are having conversations about the intersection of colorism and fat phobia, like Deshaun Harrison, and just like finding those scholars and kind of submerging myself into their work is something that has been something that I've been trying to do more, because the more that I do that, the more I'm able to spread that information on my platform, and the more that I'm able to better educate people. So that has been one thing. But also building Black Women Built This, a brand, has been something that I'm really passionate about, because with a lot of the money that I make with the brand, I give back to the community. So, we've supported a Black mom, we've supported Black girl students who are heading to college. So just doing all of that, and making that brand something that the community can be invested in and also receive support from, is something that I'm really passionate about. So yeah, that's what I've been doing.
Yes, busy as always, but that's okay. Busy in that bag.
Right.
So there's a question in the chat that says, how do you balance sharing your abundance with exercising the power of your no?
hmm That's a good question. And I think a lot of times my no gets weakened because I'm like abundance, and God put me in this position to be able to do this, and I want to do. And so I feel like that's a question that I don't have a perfect answer to. It's something that I'm learning every day. But I think the abundance part for me is understanding that as a Black woman, I deserve abundance. Like, I deserve abundance of not just tangible things that I can like touch and enjoy. I deserve an abundance of experience. I deserve an abundance of love and care, from those around me and those who are in community with me. And so I think my no is really like, that abundance shapes my no, right? Like, it's like, okay, well, this isn't serving me, so I'm gonna walk away from this, and it's gonna be a
Mm-hmm.
no.
Mm-hmm.
This doesn't feed into my goals for 2022, so I'm gonna walk away from it, and it's gonna be a no. This doesn't make me feel supported. When I go to bed at night, when I'm a part of this space and I go home, I feel depleted, I feel tired, and I also feel upset, or it triggers emotions that I have tried to work through my self-care processes. And for that reason, it's going to be a no. And so I think like being able to stand firm in those no's, but also remember that yes, it can be complicated, like holding space for nuance. Like, I think one thing, especially as like a student who is currently an undergrad, it's like there's so much prestige around so many toxic spaces. So it's like, do I preserve my time and my energy as a Black woman? Or do I join this organization? Or do I join this club? Or do I get into this honor society because it's going to enhance my resume, right? And so I feel like that's a perfect example of the tension there. But I think honestly, ultimately, I have to choose myself, right? And so that usually turns into a no. No, I can't join, even though, yes, it is prestigious, even though, yes, it could be something that would be great for other Black girls to be a part of. But what are the darker sides of that representation that we strive for? And I think like when we talk about tokenization and we talk about being the first in certain spaces, there's a lack of support for those firsts, and no one really has those conversations. And so it's important to be like, hey, community, everyone's like cheering for me because I'm the first this and I'm the first that, but how can y'all support me in this moment? And how do we build, not just how can y'all support me, but how do we build infrastructure for those who come after me to be supported as well?
Yes. Thank you so much for being here. Hearing you speak has been inspirational and motivational. It has me ready to jump in my bag a little bit more than I thought I was.
Period.
So yes, period. Just thank you so much for being here. We have about 15 minutes left. We'll probably wrap up a little early. If people do have more questions though, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Um, I feel like I'm gonna do some quick call to action. So one thing you really talked about um, is grace and taking care of yourself. And um, in this work, it can be so tough. And so I just want to make sure that message of taking care of yourself and prioritizing yourself and joy gets out there. I consider that to be a call to action, because it's something you really, in this world, in this day and age of COVID, the pandemic, and being on Zoom all the time, you just really, really have to be able to prioritize your joy. And so another thing that I love that you brought up is utilizing your platform. I think there can be this stigma around social media advocacy not being real advocacy and not being real work. And I disagree with that, because it is real work. And I think we've seen the successes that have come from, and the accomplishments that have come from uh, being on social media and utilizing social media as a tool of advocacy and getting your voice out there. So I think it's a critical piece to this work, and it's one of the main ways that young people connect and get together and have their voices be heard. So please, please always remember that utilizing social media is real advocacy, that is real work, and it is absolutely 100% valued.
Mhm.
I want to switch gears just a little bit. So as part of my work with I Be Black Girl, I'm engaging with the legislative session right now. Um, and I want other young people to be part of this process. I think it's a hard process to get into, especially as young people, and to understand. And so I want to do my best to get young people involved. And so there have been some bills introduced that are trying to strip away our rights to healthcare, our rights to abortion in particular, and to start a family or to not start a family, and in what environment to raise that family in. And so we all know that we should absolutely have the right to be able to choose and to be able to decide what we do with our bodies. And all of these bills, they all have hearing sessions. They'll all be on February 24th. And so we are really looking for young people, and all people with all experiences and all expertise to come out and share their story and talk about why we need to have access to reproductive health care and complete health care. And so my email should be dropped in the chat. If you are interested in coming and testifying in person, please, please, please email me and get that. We can get that started. We need all the voices, all the bodies, all the people to come and represent, because we know we should have the right to decide.
I love that.
Okay.
Go on,
We are
Kat.
trying. We are trying. So I think that is all I have. Thank you for being here, Diana. Like I said, it's been an inspiration. I'm so happy that you're here. I'm gonna keep following you, keep following that work that you are
Yes,
doing.
let's get in
Okay.
contact. I want to support for sure.
Yes, 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 absolutely. I can shoot you my email and all my information. Yes,
Yes.
I need it. We need to connect.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes.
Thank you so much. All right, y'all. We're gonna end this a little early. Thank you to everyone who has tuned in, who asked questions and engaged. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. You have a good night.